Have you ever been driving through Forza Horizon 6, seen the fireworks over the festival, and wondered what it actually costs you to run the thing? No, you haven't? Well, lucky for you, I have. And I've spent an embarrassing amount of time figuring it out, and some of it genuinely caught me off guard. But we'll get to that later. First, the plan. Running a festival of this size, as you'd expect, is quite expensive, with costs coming from way too many places to just throw at you all at once. So to actually make sense of it all, I've narrowed it down to 4 main areas and we'll go through them one by one, working out the expenses as we go. Oh, and one more thing by the way, nobody actually knows how long a single Horizon festival runs for, so to stop this from spiraling into total madness, I'm pricing everything for just one day. So every number you hear is the cost of running this entire event for just 24 hours. With that out of the way, let's get into it. And where else would we start but the cars? I mean, it is a racing game after all, isn't it? So when I was looking into this initially, I thought that I'd have to go through every single car individually, work out its real world price, and then add the whole thing up. But then I realized something. All the cars that you see driving around, the Horizon Festival doesn't technically own any of them. See, I've been looking into real car festivals around the world, and it turns out most of them don't pay a single dollar. The biggest one I could find as reference was the Goodwood Festival of Speed. It's held on the private estate of the Duke of Richmond, and it's one of the largest motoring events on the planet, pulling in around 200,000 people with manufacturers, private collectors, and race teams, bringing close to 600 cars. 600 cars that none of those manufacturers or collectors actually get paid for. They bring them for free because the exposure of being at Goodwood is worth more than any fee that they could get for the appearance. It's literally becoming the place to debut a new car in front of a massive crowd and an even bigger audience online. And here's the thing, if that's what the biggest car festival on earth looks like, Horizon makes it look like a car park meetup. We're talking an entire country from the streets of Tokyo all the way out to Mount Fuji. Goodwood is the most prestigious event in the world, and Horizon absolutely dwarfs it. So if the world's biggest manufacturers will just hand over their prize machines for free just to be at Goodwood, they'd be falling over themselves to get into something this big. Which means that just like Goodwood, Horizon doesn't have to own a single one of these cars. And a car that you don't own is a car that you don't have to pay for. Now, some of you might be looking at the auto show right about now, ready to call me out. For those who haven't seen it, the auto show is the menu you head to when you want to buy a car. Pick what you want, hand over the credits, and boom, it's yours. A shop with cars for sale essentially. And a shop with cars for sale means that they have to have some sort of inventory, right? And if they have inventory, that means someone somewhere, they had to pay for all of it. Well, not quite. And the clue is in the name. It's an auto show. Not an auto dealership. Nothing's actually sitting in the warehouse waiting to be sold. It's manufacturers putting their cars on display, and when you place an order, that order goes straight to the manufacturer to build. The festival never buys the stock, never holds the stock, and never pays for the stock. The manufacturers show up because being in front of this audience is the whole reward. So no, the auto show doesn't blow a hole in our budget either. But there is one place where cars do start costing money. And that's the wheel spin. Now if you somehow haven't seen what the wheel spin is, this is the slot machine that you spin sometimes that hands you a random prize for free. And some of those prizes are cars. Now for the vast majority of them that it spits out, they're regular production cars, and we've already established that manufacturers are happy to supply those. The problem is a specific category of the prize, the Forza Edition cars. There are 18 of them, and they are definitely not normal. A Forza Edition car is what happens when Playground Games takes an ordinary car and goes completely feral with it. Take the Subaru BRZ. In real life, it's a humble rear-wheel drive coupe. Its Forza Edition, however, rips out the 4-cylinder, drops in a supercharged V8, converts the whole thing into an all-wheel drive, slaps on a lift kit, and turns it into an off-road monster. Nothing of that comes in a box. You can't order one from Subaru because Subaru doesn't make it. So if the festival wants it on the grid, the festival has to build it themselves. So let's price it. The base BRZ is about 30k, a proper V8 swap about 15 to 20, the all-wheel drive conversion. Now there's no off-the-shelf kit for that, so you're paying a fab shop to custom build drive shafts, a transfer case, and a subframe, which would easily put you to another 20k. Add the lift and a $30,000 car now costs closer to 70. And the BRZ is one of the tamer ones as well. Do the same math across all 18, the V10 swapped Miata, the electric F-150, the mid-engined Escargot built from a bare tube frame, and a genuine 1970 Porsche 917 Le Mans prototype. And the whole fleet comes to around $20 million. That's a lot more than we started with. Okay, with the car sorted now, we move on to what you actually do with them. And that brings us to potentially the most iconic things that the festival put on, the showcase events. If you've never seen one, a showcase is Horizon's version of a race where your car lines up against, well, whatever they can throw at you. Over the years, the series has pitted us against jets, trains, hot air balloons, and pretty much anything that moves. Forza Horizon 6 gives us two. There's Flight Club, where a rally car races a pair of stunt biplanes, and Make My Day, where you race against a giant Gundam-styled robot. And as absurd as both of these look, they're nowhere near as expensive as you'd expect. So let's start with the easy one, the planes. Here's the good news, we don't have to guess at the price because top priced over since Flight Club uses two planes instead of one. But hold on, you might be thinking, why are we looking at the UK prices when we are already in Japan? Why not just hire local pilots and use those prices instead? Well, here's the thing. When most people picture Japanese display flying, they picture Blue Impulse, the country's famous aerobatic team. The catch is that Blue Impulse isn't a company that you can actually book. It's a squadron of the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. It's military, and you can't exactly rent the Air Force for an afternoon. Beyond them, Japan's civilian display scene is pretty small. Nothing like the deep bench of professional acts that you'd find in the US or the UK. So if you want two reliable world-class display pilots on demand, the realistic move is to fly them in, which is exactly what an event of this size would do anyway. As for the cost, the actual act itself is almost the cheap part. A professional aerobatic display runs from around a few £100 for a small UK booking to up to $8,000 for a show with a big name. The expensive bit is everything around it. The biplanes can't fly themselves to Japan, so each one has to be partly dismantled, crated, shipped across the Pacific, rebuilt and test flown when it lands, and then shipped all the way home again. Add the pilots and the mechanic crew flown out, insurance on the aircraft, and the permits to let foreign planes throw shapes over a Japanese crowd, and the whole thing lands at about $100,000. So with the planes now handled, time to move on to the one that I found to be an actual problem, the giant mech. But before we get into that, this is where I ask you to subscribe to my channel. I've recently hit 300 subs and I would love to get to 400 next. So if you're enjoying this video, a sub would go a really long way. Alright, that's it. Back to the video. So I'm not sure if you were aware, but there has never been a precedent for a giant robot racing a car. And there's a very good reason for that. You can't build one. Now, while I was researching on this, it turns out someone did actually try to build one. Japan, of course, who else? In 2014, an engineering project called the Gundam Global Challenge set out to build a real moving 18-meter Gundam. And in 2020, after all those years, the closest we ever got was a machine that could kneel, raise a hand, and take a single step in place, whilst also being tethered to a huge support gantry the entire time. Now, although we don't have an exact figure for what that one cost to build, Japan's Science and Technology Agency did run the numbers to build a Gundam that could walk for real, and they landed on something around $730 million. And this was in parts and materials alone, for a robot that could do nothing but walk. So a Gundam that can sprint down the street next to a car, it doesn't exist yet, and at $750 million, it isn't going to. So now, we need a workaround. But luckily, as it turns out, if you look closely, the game already hands us one. Because Make My Day isn't really a race, is it now? It's more of a performance. If you watch it closely, you'll catch that the mech conveniently breaks down right before the finish line. You literally cannot lose the event, which means that it was never a competition, and that changes everything. Because what this means is that now our real world robot, it doesn't need to be fast. It doesn't even need to keep up. It just has to look like a giant mech moving alongside a car and then dramatically die before the end. And that we can absolutely do. Meet the Arcax. This is a real rideable mech built by a Tokyo startup called Superman Industries. It's 4.5 meters tall, weighs 3.5 tons, has working arms and hands, and a pilot climbs inside and drives it. It's about as close to a real life Gundam as money can currently buy. The only catch? It tops out at about 10 kilometers an hour, which sounds like a deal breaker right up until you remember that we are staging a performance, not running a fair race. Because if this robot is slow, we can just bend the course in its favor, give the arc-axe a straight line to the finish, and send the car off on a winding route that loops the long way around. Now, the slow robot and the fast car reach the same point at roughly the same moment. And there you have it. You've got yourself a close race. As for the cost, this is comfortably the most expensive single thing that we've put on the board, and yet it's still a steal.
Remember that an actual walking Gundam would have run us around 700 mil. This, on the other hand,
sells for 400 million yen, that's $2.7 million, and it even comes with the first year of maintenance thrown in. For a real rideable working mech to headline your festival, that's about as cheap as a giant robot is ever going to get. So there we have it. Between our showcases, our total for this section has come to around $2.8 million. And with those now handled, we finally arrive at the thing that the entire event is actually named after. The festival itself, which includes a central hub, live music, foods, crowds and car meets running day and night. Now the car meets themselves cost us nothing, same logic as before, the cars just show up, but everything wrapped around them very much isn't free. The stages, the tents, the organizers, the artists, the security, the cleanup crews, the medical teams, that is where the money goes. So how do you price something like that? Well, you find something real to measure it against. And luckily, the world already runs its fair share of large festivals every single year. My first instinct was to look at Horizon as a music festival, which made me look at Coachella. For anyone who's missed it, Coachella is the biggest music festival on earth and it costs an estimated $130 million to put on. Perfect, I thought. I'll just scale that up to our crowd and boom, I'm done. But then I realized that to scale it, I would have to first figure out how many people our festival actually pulls. So again, I looked around the world at how big festivals can generally get. From that, I found Munich's Oktoberfest, which pulls around 6 million people over its run. Vienna's, I'm not pronouncing that, draws roughly 3 million across a single weekend. And on its record-breaking day, it packed in 1.2 million within 24 hours, the most ever at a single location. So comparing this with our festival isn't just one site, it's an entire country. Therefore, I've decided to go with an estimate of around 2 million people being present at the same time. I think this is fair because it's barely 1.5% of Japan's 124 million population, and we aren't even accounting for the tourists that will fly in specifically for this. So 2 million seems like a pretty fair assumption, which is 15 times the size of a single Coachella day. Great, I thought. Now I just multiply 15 times the crowd, 15 times the infrastructure, and even after being generous with the savings you get at scale, I landed somewhere close to $1 billion, which for one day seems like I must have miscalculated something. And turns out that yeah, I did. You see, the reason Coachella costs $130 million isn't the music, it's the location. Coachella is built on an empty polo field in the middle of the desert, which means that they truck in and construct everything from nothing. The power, the water, the toilets, the roads, medical, all of it. And then tear it all down weeks later. I'd been pricing out the cost of building an entire city for 2 million people, but a festival doesn't need that because it's already in Japan, one of the most developed nations on the planet. The city is already there, which meant that Coachella was the wrong comparison all along. What I needed was a festival that already runs inside a living city on the infrastructure that the city already provides. And there's a perfect one for just that. London's Notting Hill Carnival. Around 2 million people flood the streets of West London every single year, and almost none of it is built from scratch. And so now, what does that cost to run? A lot less. Policing and operating the whole thing comes to somewhere around only £20 million or $25 million. So finally, for the real number, we take a combination of the two benchmarks. From Notting Hill, we take the logistics, feeding, securing, stewarding and cleaning up after the crowd. Scale London's operation up to cover a whole nation, and that runs around $50 million. From Coachella, we take the music, keeping the same headliner structures that they have for the musical acts, then adding a full multi-stage lineup beneath them. Talent lands at around 25 million. Pile on the staging, the screens and the production across every hub, and that costs us another 150 million or so. So putting it all together now, the festival comes to somewhere around only 225 million a day. A lot less than what we had before. Okay, with everything else covered now, we arrive at the big one. Because as we have alluded to earlier, the Horizon Festival doesn't just race in one corner of the map, it races across the whole of Japan. So then how much would that actually cost? How much would it cost to shut down an entire country to go racing? My first instinct here was Vegas. There is a Las Vegas Grand Prix that has started to be run by F1 quite recently, and that cost around $500 million to put on. And I figured that I could just use that as my benchmark. A modern city closing its streets for a motor race, I'll just take that number and scale it to fit Japan. But then when I actually looked into where that $500 million even went, the comparison kind of started falling apart, because the overwhelming majority of it had nothing to do with closing a road. F1's owners spent around $240 million just buying a 39-acre plot of land near the strip, then hundreds of millions more building a permanent 4-story paddock complex on it that they could use as their US headquarters. So to summarize, so far we've got a land and a building, and that alone is most of the $500 million gone, with not a penny of it being spent on racing cost. Now you might be thinking, hang on, they still had to build the actual track, right? And that's not free. And yeah, you'd be right.
Ripping up the strip and relaying it with dense race-grade asphalt cost somewhere around $80 million.
So closing and building the circuit did cost real money. But here's the thing, even that doesn't really apply to us. Vegas only needed it because F1 cars hit speeds that would tear an ordinary road apart. Horizon isn't running F1 cars, it's running road cars, supercars, hot hatches, the odd hypercar, the kind of thing built to drive on streets that already exist. So for a festival, that 80 million is essentially zero. So Vegas, for all its giant $500 million headline, was a dead end. I needed a better reference. And as it turns out, there was a perfect one sitting right there in Tokyo. Because in 2024, for the very first time in the city's history, an FIA-sanctioned series closed its public roads and went racing, Formula E. And here's what that actually took. Formula E first started talking to the Tokyo government about a race back in 2013. They didn't get a deal signed until October 2022, nearly a decade of negotiating. And what they got at the end of it wasn't even downtown. It was a single 2.5-kilometer loop wrapped around one convention center on the quiet Tokyo Bay waterfront, the easy part of the city. And that one little loop is among the most expensive racing events Formula E puts on all year, somewhere around 20 to 20 million euros a race. Okay, now that we have a real number, let's see how this compares to Horizon's offerings. And the only way to actually do this was to pull every single race in the game. And so that's exactly what I did, all 86 of them.
And here's something interesting that I found.
Most of the races that Horizon runs don't touch a public road at all, because of those 86, a huge chunk are off the tarmac entirely. 20 dirt races through forests, fields and trails, 18 cross-country events bombing across open terrain, 3 drag strips set on airfields and the festival's own ground, plus the showcase events that we already paid for earlier. That's over 40 races that never shut down a single city street. They run on dirt and land, which, exactly like the cars and the festival taught from before, costs a tiny fraction of freezing a live city. So we set those aside for now. What's left is the stuff that genuinely needs tarmac closed. 15 street races, 18 road races, and 5 Toge mountain battles. 38 events that need real public roads shut down. So let's price them properly, one tier at a time. Now that Formula E loop costs around 20 million. But remember what that 20 million actually bought. A full 3-day event packed with grandstands, a fan village, hospitality suites, the entire broadcast circus. Horizon does none of that. In the game, you don't evacuate the city, you just close a route while you're racing it and then hand it straight back. So strip out the show, and what you're really paying for is the closure itself. The barriers, the marshals, the police, the safety and the medical crews. For a straightforward route, that would only cost around 5 mil a track. And most of our 38 are exactly that. Coastal sprints, suburban circuits, quiet rural roads. About 30 of them at roughly 5 million each. Then come the 5 Toge passes. Barely any commerce to freeze halfway up a mountain, but now you're guarding miles of narrow cliffside road with full medical and air ambulance cover, which, surprise surprise, isn't cheap. So let's take a fair estimate of 10 million each, bringing us to another 50 mil. And then there are the big ones. A circuit on the C1 loop, a race across Akihabara's Electric Town, and one straight through Shibuya Crossing, the biggest pedestrian intersection on Earth. Closing even one of those, and you're freezing the most valuable streets on the planet. So each of these would cost at least $50 to $100 million each. There are 3 of them, so they add anywhere from 150 to 300 mil to the total. Okay, so calculating all of them up now, 150 mil for the 30 routine closures, 50 mil for the 5 mountain passes, and another 150 to 300 mil for the 3 downtown. Add it all together, and the cost lands somewhere around 350 to 500 million dollars. Now there is one cost that I've deliberately left out, and it's the one that I genuinely can't give you. Let me explain why. Everything we've added up so far is what the festival pays. None of it touches what everyone else loses, because when you shut down a downtown street, every shop and restaurant on it takes a hit, and the people running the race don't definitely have to pay them back. And this is where Vegas, the benchmark I threw out earlier, actually comes back into play, because this happens to be the perfect example of what I'm trying to say. When F1 shut down the strip, the businesses nearby said that they lost more than $25 million between them. One corner store alone claimed $3.5 million. After a bunch of lawsuits, F1 eventually did have to cave and settle with a few of them. But here's the detail that matters. A lot of those settlements weren't monetary exchanges, they were paid in access to the race. For example, one of these settlements was with a casino, who F1 turned into an official spectator zone, because once the circuit was walled off behind barriers and fencing, a clear view of the race became a genuinely scarce thing, so the company realized that it could hand out those instead of money. And here's the problem with that in our case. Horizon doesn't have any ticketed grandstands or fences sealing off the view. The escape hatch F1 used just doesn't exist here, which leaves the festival with 2 options. Either it pays up to potentially thousands of businesses across an entire country, or it refuses and drowns in a wave of lawsuits. And so that's a number that I can't give you, because it's simply not a figure you can total up in advance. It's whatever the court orders you to give, if anything at all. Okay, with everything worked out now, let's sum it all up. 20 million on the cars, about 3 on the showcases, 225 for the festival, and somewhere between 350 to 500 for the roads. Then, being stingy with the contingency at just 10%, that still puts us somewhere between $660 and $825 million for a day. So there it is, your answer to a question that I'm fairly sure no one has ever actually asked.